Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been up to in my own allotment, my own kitchen garden here in Littlehampton on the south coast of the UK. Now, coming up this week, it's one of my favourite tasks of the year. It's planting garlic, something that I do the same time every year. Added to that, we've got some new chickens back in the kitchen garden and much more. So without much ado, let's get into it, shall we? Well, we start this week off down on the allotment, and it is September the 20th. A very important date in my calendar for two reasons. First of all, it's my wedding anniversary. But that's not the most important thing in terms of gardening. For me, it's the date that I generally get my garlic in the ground, around September the 20th. And for me, growing garlic is one of the highlights of the season, of the growing year. I love growing garlic. It's one of my favourite things to grow. I love the fact that it grows over winter and it makes it look like the allotment is doing something. It looks like there's stuff still going on over the winter months. Not only that, it's one of the most useful things to use in the kitchen. It's absolutely delicious, but we do need to grow a lot of it for it to be worthwhile, which is why I dedicate an entire bed to growing garlic. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I actually started the preparations for growing garlic, in that I cleared away all the weeds from the bed. Any remaining vegetables were cut off at ground level. And that's important because I leave the roots in the ground in order that they will die off in the ground and become basically compost in the ground. Anyway, I covered over the ground with a good layer of compost, which I gave a good rake and hoed every single day that I visited the allotment. And today I gave it another good hoe, and then I planted out my garlic. Now, planting garlic is really easy. I take a bulb of garlic. I save my garlic from garlic that I've harvested earlier this year. The biggest bulb of each variety, and I've got 7 varieties now, is saved. And I break that down into the cloves, and then all I simply do is dig a hole about 10 centimetres deep and drop a single clove into that hole, making sure the pointy end is facing upwards with the root end facing down. Drop that into the hole and give about 10 centimetres of space around that garlic clove, and repeat with another hole and another garlic clove. Right up until all my garlic is planted out. I then add a bit of garlic fertiliser. Now, I get my garlic fertiliser from a place called the Garlic Farm. I found that to be some of the best fertiliser for garlic that I can use, and I just simply scatter that on. Blood, fish and bone works just as well as another alternative, but I found garlic fertiliser to work really well on my soil. Scattered that on, and then I gave it a really thorough watering. That also backfilled the holes that I just dibbed. And now all I've got to do is wait for this garlic to germinate and start to grow. Now, I reckon within a couple of weeks we should start to see the garlic show itself. It should start to pop above the ground. All I've then got to do is about once a month I give the garlic a bit of a feed with this garlic fertiliser. Keep it weed free, of course, and then if we get any dry spells, water it to ensure that the soil stays moist. And that's all you got to do with garlic up until the middle of next year, when we harvest our garlic. It's really quite easy to grow. One of the biggest problems that I get is leek rust, little red splotches on my garlic. That can be a bit of a problem. That tends to happen towards the summer of next year, the following year. So I ain't got to worry about that at the moment, but that's generally helped with good ventilation and things like that, and moisture in the air, etc. We didn't get any this year. It's been a very good year that we haven't got any leek rust on the garlic. So That's been a real benefit. Anyway, that got all my garlic in. I also planted out my elephant garlic at the same time, which does take a little bit longer to show, but it is in the ground nonetheless. And that's it. That's my garlic in the ground for the entire growing season, which makes me very, very happy. It makes it look like the allotment is doing something over the winter months. Now, that's not all I've been doing on the allotment. I have, of course, just been running around with the hoe, and wherever there's any empty spaces, I run through with the hoe. We are slowly getting more and more spaces up here, and I am filling up any spaces that I do see with any vegetables that I can still plant out. Mostly brassicas at the moment, but there are a few other vegetables that we can plant out. However, it is coming to the end of the season. It is certainly starting to slow down, and we are going to have to think about sowing more and more green manures to fill up these spaces and ensure that we never have any empty soil, any bare soil. This is one of the big things that I do try and do. Green manures are a fantastic tool to have in our back pocket when it comes to growing our own food. I honestly do think it makes all the difference. There are a lot of green manures, and I'll be giving a bit of a talk on green manures later on in this podcast. Now, I've spoken a lot this year about using straw as a mulch, and that has worked really, really well. But one of the other things that I've done this year is straw bale gardening. I had a small bed that I managed to obtain for free, which I could fill with compost. It's a raised bed, but I figured it was going to be so expensive to fill with compost. So I decided to try straw bale gardening again this year. I've done straw bale gardening before at home, which worked quite well. I have to say it did work quite well at home, but I wanted to do it on the allotment, and I thought I could do better. So I got 2 straw bales, which cost me £7 for the 2, placed them in this bed, spent 2 weeks conditioning them, which meant adding a high nitrogen fertiliser and watering on almost a daily basis until the straw bales were conditioned. I then planted into the straw bales, directly in the straw bales, some chilies, aubergines, peppers, tomatoes, and all we've had to do is keep an eye on them, water them of course, but see how well they grow. And I've got to say, we've had quite a few chilies and aubergines and peppers from the straw bale garden. It has been really, really worth doing. I definitely will be doing straw bale gardening in some other beds in the coming years. The idea being that the straw will break down and turn to compost in time. I reckon we could get 2 years out of each straw bale. Because the straw bale do get warm, it has produced some fantastic results with things like chilies. We got early chilies on the straw bale gardening. Not quite as early as what I had in the greenhouse, but certainly earlier to anything that I had in the ground. Also much better results. I found that the straw bales didn't dry out. Because they're such a decaying matter, there's a lot of moisture in these straw bales, and they have slowly rotting down and feeding those plants with all the nutrients they've down. So it's been a real benefit. This bed that I've done this year will be still straw bale gardening next year, using the same straw bales as they slowly rot down. I'm starting to see that some of the straw has germinated, so I've got to pick those out as we go. But that will continue to rot down, and next year we'll probably be planting some of our beans in this bed to see how that perform. But on one of my other beds on the bottom half of my allotment, it's been a problem bed. I have a few of these beds that are a bit of a problem. Not a huge amount of compost has gone into this bed in the past, and everything has struggled that I've planted into this bed. So my plan is we're going to probably put 4 straw bales, maybe more than that, into that one bed next year. Get them all conditioned, and then we're going to plant the same sort of crops in that and see how that fares as well. I think it's going to be pretty good. I do think it's going to fare quite well. Again, after a couple of years that will rot down and turn to compost, so we've got a lot of benefits from it. We've just got to see how it gets on. Anyway, that's what's been going on here on the allotment. A lot of results, a lot of harvests. As I said, chilies and aubergines from the straw bale gardening and the greenhouse and outside. Apples and pears continue to provide us with plenty as well. So all in all, we're getting some really good results from the allotment. Lots of good veg and everything going the way we want it. So it's time now to head on home, where we've got some new chickens that I want to talk about. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, it's that time of this podcast where I ask you to do Amy a favour, and that is just simply leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. It helps us get found by more people who might be interested in learning more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, if you are enjoying this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. For just £5 a month, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. Not only that, once a month you also receive through your letterbox our monthly seed pack, and that seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I have carefully chosen to be sown in that very month. And along with those seeds, you also get a copy of our mini newspaper to give you a few ideas of what you could be doing that month and instructions on how to sow those seeds. Personally, I think for £5 a month, it's an absolute bargain. But to give you a bit of an idea what we have been sowing over this last week, we've sown some chervil, which is a delicious herb, not often grown, but it's a delicious herb that often gets overlooked. We've also been sowing some cauliflowers, which are going to be our spring cauliflowers. Again, another fantastic plant, but probably one of the hardest plants, I think, to grow in terms of vegetables. But we're going to give it a go anyway. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in signing up, then please head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. In the meantime, let's get back to the gardening. Well, I'm sat down in the kitchen garden back at home now, looking at two new chickens that I've managed to get this weekend. Now, as you know, I do keep chickens, but a few weeks ago we lost Bear, my oldest chicken, which is of course really sad, and we're not replacing her in the slightest. But while I've been keeping chickens, what I've really learned is, in order to keep our eggs coming so that we always have enough eggs, is every couple of years I need to buy another couple of chickens. Unfortunately, chickens do die, and they don't like being on their own, so I do find that by buying them every couple of years, we're able to sort of keep the consistency going. They're never on their own, we're always getting our eggs. So I've got two new chickens. Steel and Panther is their name. One's a Skyline and one's a Moss Bell, and we chose those particular varieties of chickens. One's going to give us a green coloured eggshell, the other's going to give us a blue coloured eggshell. So we have pretty much every colour of egg going on in this garden now. It's quite good. Brown, white, blue, green. 5 chickens in total, with one of them basically too old to lay any eggs. Obviously, these two new chickens, they're not going to be laying eggs for a few weeks yet, but hopefully once they do start laying, which will be probably, I reckon, Halloween when they start laying eggs, they should provide us with eggs every single day. Now, getting chickens is only part of the story here. There's quite a few parts of this story, actually, but one of the things that we have to do when we get new chickens is we have to integrate the new chickens in with the existing flock, i.e. they have to get used to each other. If they go straight in, they will fight, and it can be a bit of a bloodbath. So what I've done is, with the chicken run that I have and the chicken coops, I've sectioned off one area, and I've put the new chickens in that sectioned off. And this just means that they're close enough that they can see each other, but they can sort of get to know each other, but they can't attack each other. Now, we've noticed Gertie, who is now my oldest chicken, she was getting really quite vocal when the new chickens arrived. But a couple of days later, she has now started to settle down. So it'll take a couple of weeks before we can actually pop them all in together. But for now, they're getting used to each other, they're seeing what's going on. It's looking good. It's always exciting to get new chickens, I think, anyway, because they're just great pets to have. Really are. I feel the kitchen garden is really complete with chickens. I've spoken about them many, many times. They give us eggs, they're good for pest control, they're good for manure, they're good for compost. So, love having chickens. Now, there is another part to this story because, as I said, it's our wedding anniversary, and when we went over, we decided we would stop off somewhere and go for a bit of a dog walk with the dog. And I chose One Garden, which is a free garden just north of Brighton. It's created as part of an educational part of a college, so it's a really good garden to go and visit. We had a bit of a wander around there. Dogs are welcome. We had a lovely tour of the vegetable garden, the plants going on, the Canada garden, lots of really good amazing things going on in this garden. But next to it was a bit of a salvage yard, a bit of a junk shop, I guess you could say. And I've seen this here when I've visited this place before, but we decided to pop in there as well. And as soon as we walked in, I heard my wife go, "Ooh, look at that!" And I knew exactly what it was. We've been keeping an eye out for an antique metal garden bench for a while for the right price, and there was one as we came in, and I could tell she loved it straight away. We had another bit of a look around. We asked a few questions about the bench, and they said they could do it for a really good price. Actually, we're really happy with that price, but they also said that it comes as part of a kit. So you've got the bench, two other chairs, and a table as well, bistro table. Well, we went back the following day and we brought the lot. It's actually a very, very reasonable price. I won't tell you how much, but we're very happy with the price. We've brought them home. I will have to give them a good sort of clean with a bit of wire wool and a repaint at some point in the future to stop it from rusting or anything. I believe it's made from aluminium, so it's not likely to rust, but we want to protect it. We've had quite a few garden benches and tables in our garden over the years since we've lived here, and they do rust away really, really quickly, despite us protecting them and doing what we can to make them last. The thing is, I'm fairly close to the sea here, so we get a lot of salt in the air around here, and I think that, of course, just eats into the metal and makes things rust. So we're hoping this antique aluminium set should last much longer, and of course we've got to treat it to make sure it does last. So our winter project is going to be cleaning these up and giving them a good lick of paint. However, we're really happy with them. They look fantastic. They're a bit of a wedding gift to each other, I guess you could say, an anniversary present to each other. So very happy with them. And I think we're going to enjoy eating our lunch or dinners or coffee out in the garden even more. I've always said having somewhere to sit in the kitchen garden, the allotment, is important. Just looking out across the garden is such an important part of gardening, and this is definitely something that's going to help with that. Now, the kitchen garden is still rather full, I've got to say. I'm looking around trying to see if we've got any spaces that I can sow any green manures, because I'm going to be talking about green manures in the potting shed in a moment, and I haven't. It is still so full of vegetables that we have no space, so I'm not complaining. Still plenty of tomatoes outside that are still delivering, still ripening, so it's really good going. However, I've seen Robin Redbreast has started to revisit our kitchen garden and making its return visit. I think it comes back every year, so I've made sure the houses, bird houses, are ready for them. Hopefully I'm going to try and encourage and see if I can get this Robin Redbreast that visits our garden to eat from my hand. I've seen it done. I'm looking to try and do that myself because I love wildlife. I think they're fantastic. Anyway, it's getting a bit chilly, so I'm going to head on into the potting shed. I'm going to talk to you about green manures. In the meantime, let's find out the recipe of the week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's certainly been a drop in the temperature over the last week. It's certainly getting considerably colder. But one of the things I really do enjoy doing when it gets colder is wrapping up with a nice warm meal, especially some of our roasted vegetables. And that's something that I've done with a lot of the vegetables that I have harvested over this weekend. In fact, I made a roasted autumn veg with garlic and herbs. And you can find this recipe on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Now, this was a great recipe to make because it used a lot of the vegetables that I've been harvesting from my allotment this week. And best of all, it only needed one pan. So how did we make it? Basically, I took one aubergine, cut it into chunks and threw that into a pan. I then took one head of broccoli, broken it down into its florets and added that to the pan. Took 3 cloves of garlic, crushed that over, added to the pan. 2 chilies, which I've chopped up really nice and small, and I've added to the pan. Then I've added a few sprigs of thyme and rosemary, bit of salt and pepper to taste. But then as an optional extra, I've chopped a few wedges of pear and apple and also added that to the pan as well, just to be a little bit different. Preheated the oven to gas mark 6, and then I just drizzled olive oil all over the vegetables and placed that in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, tossing every now and then so that all the vegetables were coated in the oil. It absolutely delicious. It caramelized at the edges, and that's when we knew it was ready. Now, we served this actually with some roast pork, and it went really well. The apple really works well with pork, as I'm sure you can imagine. But, there's other things we could do to this. Add some cubed halloumi or feta, extra richness. Add a few grains such as quinoa or bulgur wheat just to make it into a bit of a salad. Roast, of course, or, as I said, adding those pears and apples also just added a bit of sweetness as well. Really tasty, really, really tasty, really easy to do. One pan and nice and delicious. Give it a try. Let me know how you get on. As I said, the recipe can be found at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Now, one of the things that I've been doing over this last week is just getting my seed boxes collection into some sort of order, something that we should be doing. In particular, based on the back of last week's homework, after I've set you all to start thinking about your plans for next year, you're drawing out your allotment, drawing out your garden, thinking about what you want to grow in the next year. Going through your seed box does help with that. By the way, how are you getting on with your plans for next year? Please do share with us. It'll be great to see some of them. But one of the boxes that I found is a seed box that I've dedicated to my green manures, because I really do enjoy growing green manures. In fact, for me, green manures are such an important part of growing vegetables that I consider them essential. Now, what are green manures? Basically, they are a type of fast-growing plant crop, and they're grown and it could be incorporated into the soil to help improve its fertility, structure, or organic matter content. Rather than harvesting the foliage itself, it's all about incorporating into the soil. But they could also be known as a cover crop or things like that, and they help protect bare soil from erosion. They suppress weed growth. They return nutrients back into the soil, in particular nitrogen in certain cases. They improve the soil for future crops. There's just so many good reasons. The main reason that I like to grow green manures is because it helps improve the soil. And the better soil we have, the better crops we will have. It's such an important part for me that I do it every year. And I talk about green manures quite often. Now, some of the common green manures that I personally use are, well, you've got various types of clover, vetch, rye, mustard, buckwheat, to name a few. But I like to use a few mixes. So I've got a mix that are designed to be down for potato beds. We've already sown some of these down on the allotment a couple of weeks ago, and they're a mix of like mustard and radish that help actually clean the soil of any of the bugs that might dig into our potatoes. I'm trialling also one that is designed for sweet corn. We'll see how that goes. We have something like Phacelia, which is one of my favourite green manures, which is a legume. It adds nitrogen into that soil when we cut it down, but it's really quick growing, really thick, dense foliage that I found it really has also reduced the amount of couch grass that I get on the allotment. I will be sowing a type of green manure called winter tares this week down on the allotment, which again is specifically designed to grow over winter, to really deal with that cold weather and that wet weather. Helps break down my heavy clay soil. We also sow some field beans, which are like basically legumes, like any other bean. They just help add nitrogen to the soil. So these are all really good green manures to grow. They help with that nutrient enrichment, particularly the legumes, clover, beans, etc. They fix that atmospheric nitrogen into the soil, making it available for common crops. The roots hold that soil structure together. When it rains, it holds it together so it doesn't get washed away. And when we cut it all down before we want to grow something, it helps decompose into that soil and add organic matter. There's just so many good reasons to grow green manures. Now, often green manures are often sown after harvesting the main crops in the sort of late summer, autumn, winter, over winter, like we're doing at the moment. But you can sow them at any other time of the year, depending on the type of green manure that you are dealing with. Generally, it's really easy to sow. You just clear the ground, scatter a few seeds on the soil, and then rake or tread them in just to ensure they've got some good contact with the soil, and then wait for them to germinate. But I also like to sow some around some of my other plants in order to sort of help my other plants grow and just sort of reduce that, I guess, monoculture, a bit of polyculture going on. It's just a green manure in amongst your vegetables, reduces the amount of bare soil, and bare soil is never a good thing. Now, some of these non-hardy green manures, they might actually die back naturally over winter, making them easy to manage in the spring. But if they don't die back, you just simply get your hoe out, cut them all down to the ground, leave the foliage and everything to rot down in the ground for a couple of weeks. Or you could, of course, lift it up and put it to your compost heap. But I like to leave it in situ and then plant our plants when we need to plant them. Really, really easy to do, and it's so many good reasons to grow green manures that for me, they absolutely must be grown at this time of year in order to keep our soils in good health. Often you will see gardeners start to bring out bits of plastic to cover their soil. This does it for you, and it's much more natural. Really worth trying, really, really worth giving it a go. Well, we are coming to the end of this week's podcast. Hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, then please leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. I haven't had any rates or reviews coming over this last week, but we've had some really good numbers coming in lately as well. So please do rate and review if you've enjoyed this podcast. Please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. Would love to have you there. Always welcome. Details on that at theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk, but also on our website. You can leave us a voicemail or you can leave us a comment on the end of a blog post. You can contact me by email, richard@veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, or you can also find me on social media where we'd love a like and a follow as well. Well, that is it. We will be back again next time. So until then, please take care.